What if giving away your money could make you richer? Not as a spiritual concept, not as a motivational quote, but as a precise, documented, historically verified financial and strategic reality. John D. Rockefeller gave away over $500 million during his lifetime. At the time, it was the largest philanthropic transfer of wealth in human history. More than any king, more than any emperor, more than anyone who had ever lived. And when the final accounting was done, after every gift, every foundation, every university, every hospital, Rockefeller was worth more than when he started giving. This was not an accident. This was not luck. This was a system, as carefully designed and as precisely executed as every other system in the Rockefeller Code. By the end of this episode, you will understand exactly how it worked and why the same strategy is still being used by every major billionaire on the planet today. This is the Rockefeller Code. To understand Rockefeller's philanthropy, you have to go back to the very beginning, not to the peak of his wealth, not to the founding of Standard Oil, back to the small leather ledger of a 16-year-old boy earning 50 cents a day. In episode 1 of this series, we decoded the three-pile system Rockefeller used from his very first paycheck. 10% saved, 10% given, 80% for everything else. Most people focus on the saving. The giving is equally important and far more interesting. Rockefeller was a devout Baptist who believed that money was not something to be hoarded but shared. He practiced the biblical admonition of tithing, giving at least 10% of his income away from his very first paycheck at age 16. His mother, Eliza, had taught him from childhood that every dollar that came into his hands carried a responsibility. Not just to save it, not just to grow it, but to steward it, to recognize that wealth created an obligation to something larger than yourself. Rockefeller never forgot that lesson, even when he was earning almost nothing. Even when the 10% he gave away meant real sacrifice in his daily life. From 1855, when Rockefeller gave his first philanthropic gift, until almost the turn of the 20th century, his giving was spread across many individuals and institutions, largely focused on the Baptist Church and universities. Founded as Baptist institutions such as the University of Chicago and Spelman College, the giving came before the wealth. And Rockefeller believed, genuinely and deeply, that the giving was part of the reason the wealth came. But as Rockefeller's wealth exploded in the 1870s and 1880s, his giving created a problem that nearly overwhelmed him. Rockefeller had been giving to charity since age 19. He had emerged in the public eye as a very wealthy man known for his generosity. He was stalked, badgered, harassed, followed wherever he went. He couldn't walk down the aisle of his church without people asking for money. Steamer trunks of letters would come in pleading cases. It was constant. Rockefeller was overwhelmed. Steamer trunks, full of begging letters, arriving every single day, from individuals, institutions, churches, hospitals, schools. Every person in America who needed money had figured out that John D. Rockefeller had it and was willing to give it. His personal staff could not process the volume. He was giving money away haphazardly, responding emotionally to individual cases rather than strategically. He later called this retail giving, and it was bleeding him dry, not financially, but psychologically. The weight of being the answer to everyone's problems was becoming unsustainable. He needed a system. He needed a Frederick Gates. Frederick Taylor Gates was an ordained Baptist minister with the mind of a Wall Street banker. Rockefeller first encountered him in 1888 when Gates was raising funds for the creation of the University of Chicago. Rockefeller was impressed with Gates's abilities in business and philanthropy and hired him as his full-time personal philanthropic advisor in 1892. Later, Rockefeller credited Gates with being the guiding genius in all our giving. Gates immediately brought the same principles to Rockefeller's giving that Rockefeller had applied to his refinery floors. Efficiency, strategy, system. He divided giving into two categories that would reshape American philanthropy permanently. Gates gradually developed and introduced into all of Rockefeller's charities the principle of scientific giving. He found Rockefeller laying aside retail, giving almost wholly, and entering safely and pleasurably into the field of wholesale philanthropy. To the end of his career, Gates would sweep aside petty applications with the scornful words, that is, retail business, retail giving, responding to individual requests one at a time. Emotional, inefficient, and ultimately unsatisfying because it addressed symptoms, not causes. Wholesale philanthropy, building institutions that address the root causes of problems at massive scale. Universities that would educate thousands. Medical research institutes that would cure diseases for millions. Foundations that would operate for generations after Rockefeller himself was gone. In 1902, Rockefeller endowed the General Education Board with an initial $1 million. Almost $325 million of his money eventually flowed through its books. These were the largest gifts in the United States during their day. The University of Chicago, to which he gave $75 million. The Rockefeller Institute for Medical Research, $50 million. The General Education Board, $50 million. Not retail, wholesale, not addressing individual suffering, building the infrastructure that would reduce suffering at civilizational scale. But alongside the hundreds of millions in institutional giving, Rockefeller maintained one personal habit that became perhaps the most famous image of his later life. He carried shiny new dimes wherever he went. A highly publicized Rockefeller practice was giving shiny new dimes to people he would encounter, especially children. One source estimated Rockefeller gave away $35,000 in dimes. For a child, a dime was a small fortune, especially in a candy store. The dime strategy was brilliant on multiple levels. It was personal, a direct human connection between the world's wealthiest man and ordinary people. It was memorable. Nobody forgets the day a billionaire handed them a coin, and it was a masterclass in public relations. A single image of Rockefeller handing a dime to a child did more for his public reputation than any press release ever could. Today, his grave in Cleveland, Ohio, is regularly adorned with shiny dimes left by visitors. A man who died in 1937 is still receiving dimes from people who admire him nearly a century later. That is the power of a personal gesture executed consistently over decades. Now, here is the part of the story that most people never hear, because it changes everything about how you understand Rockefeller's philanthropy. He did not give because he felt guilty about his wealth. He gave because he had understood since age 16 that giving was part of the system, as fundamental and non-negotiable as saving and investing. But the wholesale philanthropy strategy Gates helped him build did something else too, something that every major billionaire since Rockefeller has quietly replicated. Under pressure of old age, the new income tax law, inheritance taxes, and the government's antitrust case against Standard Oil, Rockefeller accelerated his charitable contributions, giving $100 million to the new Rockefeller Foundation and another $50 million to his General Education Board. The same year, he was writing $100 million checks to his foundation. Congress was trying to tax his fortune. The Rockefeller Foundation was not just philanthropy. It was a perfectly legal mechanism to protect his wealth from taxation, while simultaneously funding causes he genuinely believed in and building a legacy that would outlast any individual business. On December 24th, 1919, Rockefeller donated $100 million in a single gift, at the time the single largest philanthropic gift in the history of the world. Adjusted for inflation, that gift would be worth over $1.3 billion today. And by 1912, after giving away hundreds of millions, Rockefeller's fortune still totaled $900 million. He was giving faster than his investments were growing, and he was still getting richer. The Rockefeller philanthropic model is the direct ancestor of every major billionaire foundation operating today. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Warren Buffett's Giving Pledge. All of them follow the wholesale philanthropy principle Gates developed for Rockefeller in 1892. Build institutions that address root causes at scale rather than responding to individual symptoms. And every one of them uses the same structural mechanism Rockefeller pioneered, the private foundation, which allows wealth to be transferred out of taxable estates while remaining under family influence and direction for generations. The giving is real. The belief is genuine, And the financial architecture is as carefully designed as anything Rockefeller ever built on a refinery floor. Both things are true simultaneously. That is the code. John D. Rockefeller gave away his first dime at age 16 when he could barely afford to eat. He gave away his last $100 million at age 80 when he was the wealthiest human being alive. The amount changed. The principle never did. Give first. Give systematically. Give at scale. Build institutions, not just gestures. And structure the giving so that it works as hard as every other dollar in your system. The most powerful fortunes in history are not built by taking everything. They are built by understanding that giving is not the opposite of wealth. It is part of the code. This is the Rockefeller Code.